I know. I know.
We all know. We all get to read about that. And very happy it's not us, right?
Okay, you can go ahead and start the meeting.
Let's call the meeting to order and ask the clerk to call the roll of members.
Director Brown,
Yes, here.
Vice Chair Josie,
Here.
Chair Halbert.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Very good. Item 3 is meeting open to the public, a chance for members of the public to make comment on any item not on the agenda. Do we have any speakers who have indicated wanting to speak?
So I don't see any attendees in this meeting today, and we didn't receive any public comment via email.
Okay, very good. Item 4 is minutes approval of April 26th meeting. I'll move that we approve.
Second, Josie.
Second, any clarifying questions or comments about the minutes? Seeing none, I'll ask for the roll call of the vote.
Director Brown,
Yes.
Vice Chair Josie,
Yes.
Chair Halbert.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Item 5, thank you. Item 5 is approval of the Tri-Valley Hub Network Integration Study. Staff report.
That would be mine. I noticed your name is Care Hover on the, the little thing below the screen. Okay. Anyway, what we have here is a staff recommendation to forward to the board a recommendation for approval of the Tri-Valley Hub Network Integration Study, and authorize the executive director to forward that to the California State Transit Association agency. You might remember way back in 2018, CalSTA, as it is called, awarded a grant of $20,500,000 to LAVTA. 20 million of that was for the construction of a new parking garage at the BART station, and 500,000 of that was for LAVTA to conduct this study. And so the study was conducted by AECOM, a consulting firm for us, and Justin Fox is on the call today, representing AECOM. Also on the call with us today is Keith Whalen from the Ascendo Group, and they were the project manager for LAVTA on this project. And Keith is going to walk you through a little presentation on the study and the conclusions and the next steps. So with that, I'll just turn it over to Keith and allow him to give his presentation.
Great, thank you, Tony, for that introduction, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today to this committee. I very much have appreciated the opportunity to work on this study with AECOM, with the LAVTA staff, and with a variety of members of our technical advisory committee who were very active and very supportive of this process. This overview really is broken down into 3 parts, is looking at how we ultimately viewed the Tri-Valley Hub location identification process, to give you a little bit of an update on what we found in the study in terms of filling in gaps that are identified in the state rail network, and then ultimately what we looked at in terms of how the Tri-Valley Hub could be improved to enhance the passenger experience, improve movement, and ultimately make it a better location to serve multiple rail services and bus services coming into that location. Again, as Tony mentioned, my name is Keith Whalen. I'm with the Ascendo Group, and also with us today is Justin Fox of AECOM. So between the two of us, as well as Tony and Michael, we can respond to any questions that you may have either during the course of this presentation or once it concludes. The purpose, as Tony mentioned, was threefold of this study. One was to identify and confirm the location of the Tri-Valley Hub. The most important thing was for it to work to really become a link for existing and future transit and rail services throughout the region, as well as being a southern terminus for express bus services, if any were ultimately determined to be added through the course of this study. The second big part of this was to close major gaps in the state rail plan in the East Bay area, specifically looking at the I-680 and the I-580 corridor, determine if transit services could enhance the state rail plan and close those gaps. And the third was, once the Tri-Valley Hub location was confirmed and selected, to enhance its functionality and attractiveness, to look at options for doing so. As previously mentioned, CalSTA was the sponsoring agency for this and provided funding, and Caltrans was the oversight agency and did participate on the technical advisory committee. Again, this was the study area, loosely the 580 from the Pleasanton ACE and the Dublin Pleasanton BART station into the Central Valley up to Stockton, and then the 680 corridor from those same locations, the Dublin Pleasanton area, up into the Fairfield Sassoon region. The project study team, as previously mentioned, was LAFTA. Thank you very much to Michael and Tony for your support on this study. It was a real pleasure to work with you and gain your insights and support during this process. Technical Advisory Committee, which I'll come back to in just a second, and then the consulting team of AECOM, Justin Fox lead, and myself with the Sendall Group, all working together to ultimately come up with this final report that was included in your agenda packet. I think it's really important to mention that this was a very widespread and comprehensive technical advisory committee. We had a great deal of support from a number of agencies and really appreciated their involvement in the technical advisory committee meetings. They reviewed the technical memos, they supplied edits, comments, and really this report is a culmination of not only the work that was done by AECOM with support of myself and the team at Sendall Group, but really of this committee, a very good group of people, very active and very supportive of the process. The study ultimately took 20 months to complete. This encompassed, as I mentioned before, 4 TAC meetings that loosely covered the identification of the Tri-Valley Hub, look at work along the 680 for the express bus service, conceptual plans for the 680 express bus service, and then ultimately improvements for the Tri-Valley Hub. The 4 technical memorandas were reviewed by the TAC members, including and LAFTA staff. Any changes, edits, comments were incorporated into those tech memos before they went final. And then ultimately, the tech memos were used to compile the final report, which also received comments from the TAC. The first section that we wanted to touch on was the location of the Tri-Valley Hub. There were 3 locations that were ultimately evaluated: Pleasanton ACE, West Dublin Pleasanton BART, and then the Dublin Pleasanton BART station, which was ultimately selected for the garage, as well as the upgrades or proposed upgrades that we looked at in this study. It's important to note that this study was not an engineering study. When we looked at this location, it was important to identify and confirm the location. But then when we looked at the enhancements to the location, these were very high level, with the more detailed engineering studies coming at a later date. We ultimately selected the Dublin Pleasanton BART station on a number of factors. First and foremost, this is a true hub. It is served by a number of different agencies, a number of different services, both rail and bus, and it will be ultimately be a terminus, I believe, for the Valley Link service in about 2028. I think everybody would agree, hopefully sooner. With the new parking garage, it has the capacity and the space to add significant new parking. And there's a number of opportunities to improve the existing facilities without extensive capital investment. It was relatively easy when we looked at this to add bus bays. There is an AV, autonomous vehicle shuttle deployment that would really enhance the accessibility of this station and integrate it with the local community, businesses and retail, as well as residential. There's opportunity to expand bike and scooter storage and parking. And ultimately, this is a very walkable station that links all the different elements of it together, bus and rail, as well as opportunity to improve it with electronic wayfinding. This was a clear-cut location that was selected, and it was supported unanimously by the TAC. The other element was this of the study was to look at how we could ultimately improve bus service. Again, the foundation of this was the California State Rail Plan and how the services along the 680 corridor and the 580 could be improved. In this California State Rail Plan, they specifically call out express bus service along the 680 to fill this gap, looking at a service implementation in 2022 with headways of about an hour with less time during peak and then ramping up in the out years, and ultimately to connect the state rail and transit systems between Capital Corridor, the San Joaquins, ACE, BART, and various bus operations in the region. So this study was a very regionally based approach to look at how the services, both rail and bus, could be linked and coordinated to ultimately create a much better regional link for services along the 680 and the 580. I want to just note here that the 580 was determined not to proceed with additional or enhanced services due to the service that is already located on the 580. And I'll come back to that in a little bit. But for now, let's talk about the 680 express service. Initially, the service looked at going to the Fairfield-Suisun Amtrak station down to what was identified as the Tri-Valley Hub, the Dublin, Pleasanton, BART station. Ultimately, it was decided through a number of discussions with the TAC, with LAFTA, and other agencies that we would look at making this bus service from Martinez to Dublin, Pleasanton. This would produce a one-seat ride from that location, significantly reducing travel time using public transportation, and maximizes rail connection between the Capital Corridor services and the various BART and rail services into the Dublin, Pleasanton station, which ultimately will be called the Tri-Valley Hub. This service, the study also looked at how we could produce a service or operating plan. And we looked at having this service be branded independently or different from the services currently in the area. We're looking at 5 buses with potential of using used buses initially, but transitioning to zero emission buses as quickly as possible. We looked at Bollinger Canyon Ride as one of the locations that could help serve the Bishop Ranch area. And it was also, the service would connect the various rail services that we mentioned before. During peak times, the service would go down to the Pleasanton ACE station to link the ACE service as well. The next steps that we identified were really looking at how this would be governed. Through the discussions with the TAC as well as the member agencies, it was clear that there is no desire to set up yet another agency. So the JPA is probably not something that we would necessarily look at doing. Alternatively, I think the best way to approach this is simply putting together a joint operation through an MOU that would allow County Connection and LAFTA to coordinate in the ultimate delivery of this service. What was very clear, however, is that new funding sources need to be identified. I'm very excited to say that we have looked at a number of things in this area, and I think we have some real progress. One of the real exciting things about this study is that it's delivering a conceptual plan of I-680 service, this express service, that is very implementable and has generated a lot of excitement throughout the region to ultimately deliver. And CalSTA and other agencies are very interested in this project and are looking to find funds to ultimately fund the capital purchases as well as the operation of the service. Additionally, and I think Michael might be able to expand on this, but there's been some of this service that's been, and the vehicle and the capital purchases that were included in earmarks. So we're very hopeful that ultimately the funds will come through to see this service begin service in 2022 and get on the street to enhance that mobility in the region for people going from Martinez to the Tri-Valley Hub. As I mentioned before, the I-580, the existing services were found to be satisfactory. However, if the 580 is ultimately expanded and the congestion along the 580 is mitigated, that would allow additional services to be of value, it would be something that we certainly would want to readdress in the future. But at this time, there was no additional or enhanced services on the 580 that were recommended in this study. The last thing I want to mention is the Tri-Valley Hub improvements. Again, this was not an engineering study, but an overview of the Tri-Valley Hub and how this area could be improved as we look at new services, both trail and transit coming into that location. They were, again, the improvements are conceptual and scalable as demand is both in people coming into that location, via car, via pedestrian, via the AV shuttle. It's very scalable and again, conceptual. They're incremental, so that as services into the hub and or demand increases, the improvements can be built upon each other and enhance the overall functionality of the facility as time goes on. And ultimately, BART was very involved in this study and provided a lot of feedback through this. And so any improvements do need to be supported by all the users, including BART and City of Dublin and Pleasanton. We looked at 5 different options of locating new bus service, specifically the I-680 Express service into this station. Ultimately, D and E were found to be the most feasible, as they required the least amount of changes to the operation and the functionality of the station as it exists today. And so we certainly, as we go forward, would look at E and D as where we would want to add bays. The other one that is interesting is A. This would be a fairly low cost addition of a couple of bays. The negative here was it would be only allow for 1 or 2 stops there and didn't integrate with other bus service. It was a little bit of a longer walk to the BART station than E or D would provide. We also looked at adding some sidewalk covers. And again, that is something that would enhance the passenger experience and the user's ability to go from one location to another with some shade and or shielding from rain or other elements as they move from one part of the station to another. Enhanced wayfinding and electronic to provide real-time identification of time of different services coming into the station is something that is very important and should be part of the plan, the station plan going forward, as well as enhancing signs and expanded bus storage at the location. As we mentioned, this is a great location for an AV shuttle, and part of the study did look at how an AV route could link this station to local retail, business parks, and residential areas. The route on the right is very conceptual, but we do believe there's a real opportunity to integrate the LAFTA AV shuttle projects into this station and bring another dynamic element to this location. So in conclusion, we would recommend moving forward with the I-680 Express bus service. The passenger modeling and the support of the TAC would all make this a very viable project and very exciting. Continue to work on establishing and confirming the governance structure, which again, we recommend is an MOU or a very simple governance structure so as to not create another government agency. Secure a funding source, which is obviously critical, so as not to take away from existing services for either agency, and either agency being County Connection or LAFTA. And then obviously continue the coordinated work to work with cities and operators across the region, but specifically Dublin and Pleasanton and BART to look at the overall success of the Tri-Valley Hub and the enhancements to that facility going forward. So again, thank you very much for your time. This has been, again, a very exciting project. It's been supported regionally as well as through the LAFTA team. We have certainly started and ended in a place that is a bit different than I thought we would, but that's the beauty of this study and the way that it was ultimately conducted. Again, thank you for the opportunity to present our findings with you today, and certainly open to any questions. And thanks again to Michael and Tony for your support on this project.
Questions? Anyone?
Sure. I will if nobody else has any.
I have some, but I'll wait for you. Go for it.
All right. I'm trying to get up on the regular screen here so I can see everybody. Sorry. There we go. All right. Thank you for your presentation. This is a lot of data, and you use a lot of acronyms. So some of my questions are pretty basic. So I'm hoping some of the other board members can dig a little deeper. But you stated that this has been approved by the city of Pleasanton. I don't remember voting on this. Were you referring to city staff, or did you come to a city council approval?
I'm sorry if I said that. What I meant to say was anything that happens at ultimately the Tri-Valley Hub or the Dublin, Pleasanton, BART station would need the approval of the BART, the city councils.
That's true. Okay, good. Yeah, that makes more sense. So thank you. You use some acronyms that it's interesting. You defined MOU, which I think we pretty well know that, but what is MAX and START, S-T-A-R-T? What are those?
MAX is Modesto Area Express, and STAR is Stanislaus Regional Transit, or more or less, those are what the acronyms stand for. They're services that are coming in from the Central Valley, commuter bus services.
That's why I'm not familiar with them. Okay. And then on funding, you referred to TIRCP. What is TIRCP as a funding source?
Transit. Go ahead, Keith.
Go ahead, Justin.
TIRCP, I believe you're saying it's the TIRCP acronym. Yeah, that's the Transit and Intercity Rail project that's run out of CalSTA. They are the funding source for this study and other network integration plans that have been held throughout the state.
Okay, because you guys are global, you're a big region. I'm just Little Pleasanton, so sorry,
Right.
I'm just not clear on some of these things. And then when you stated you'll need some new funding sources, what would you call new funding sources? Are you looking at funding from whether it's out of the area, or are you looking, because obviously we have Measure BB, not that there's earmarked funds for this. Are you looking at funding from San Joaquin County, or are you looking for another ballot measure for for Alameda County?
Michael, not sure if you want to jump in on this or not, but basically what we are looking at is a number of different potential sources of money for this. But CalSTA has certainly identified this, the 680 Express service, as a service that they're very excited about, they would like to see on the road. So that TIRCP grant would be one thing that we would look at doing for both the capital project as well as operating funds. And CalSTA has also looked at whether or not they could find other monies that would help support this project. It also, this project is being supported by County Connection and CCTA as well as LAFTA. They have looked at earmarks that would help with the capital purchases of new buses as well as the operating funds.
Okay, great. And last question is really for Michael. We have what is it called, the 80X, the 680X that runs right along 680 and goes north. I'm trying to grapple about, we're already doing this. We talked about using the shoulder of the road. sorry for the basic question. I'm just trying to find out the differences of running that 680 corridor all the way up to Martinez versus, this is a huge project and it's a whole lot more than Wheels, and I totally understand that. But for Wheels specifically, we already run a bus right up the 680, and I remember former county supervisor Scott Haggerty always had a problem with that because we were leaving Alameda County and going into Contra Costa County, but we on the board always supported that route. So just, if you don't mind, just a little basic primer about how this is going to be different to Wheels.
Yeah, it's a good question. So it's the 70X that
70.
operates on that 680, which is not to be confused with the 580X, which operates on the 580. But Keith, how would you characterize the 70X in relation to the outcome of this project and the express bus service envisioned on the 680 as part of this MOU? I mean, I have my thoughts, but you'd probably be a better one for a quick soundbite.
Yeah, I certainly the 70X has come up in conversations. I believe that the Hacienda Business Park, is that correct, Michael?
Yes.
They asked a very similar question. From my perspective, we don't. There's nothing in this service that we would want to diminish service. So I see this as an enhancement to that corridor, into that service. I will say, as far as the 70X goes, I'm not entirely an expert on that route, but we are looking at that route in relation to this service to make sure that they work together to enhance mobility in that particular that portion of this overall corridor.
Yeah, Tony.
Yeah, let me jump in here for a second. So the 70X is not what you would call the most productive service in the world. And in most agencies, an express bus service that carries 10 passengers an hour is really not a high performing service. And it runs 6 trips in the morning, 6 trips in the afternoon, and about 70% of the ridership is from the north to the south. So from Contra Costa County to the BART station in the morning, and from the south to the north in the afternoon. And we're carrying about 150 people a day. So you can imagine most trips have between 10 and 15 people on a 40-foot bus. So I think what this project is looking at is adding frequency and making it a more attractive service, because it would give people the ability to get home in the middle of the day, which they don't have the option for right now, and to bring about a uniquely branded service to kind of market this thing as a connector between different rail groups. As Keith said, this goes all the way north to Fairfield. So you're connecting with a number of different rail services that might be attractive for somebody from our area to actually go north to catch the Capitol Corridor or whatever. So it's different than the 70X. It might ultimately take the place of the 70X, and we could allocate those resources to someplace else. But that's to be determined.
And then maybe this is kind of a Keith, Michael, Tony question, but if we don't increase ridership, I have a hard time as a board member now, I know we're all down low in our ridership, but if we've got 6 trips now and we're only carrying 10 to 15 passengers per hour, better to increase my ridership. Or I kind of got, usually what we're doing around town is making changes about opportunities. You don't get 6 trips a day, you get 2 trips a day, something like that, to pair it up to ridership. Because I mean, I assume the goal is to really pick up some riders that we don't have now because of the connectivity. But if it doesn't work, I want to make sure that Wheels has the ability to pare down this increased routes. I mean, it's quite a loss for us, and not even just in COVID times. I mean, it's always been a low rider number, and it was, you're absolutely right, to increase people that were coming from the north to come to Hacienda Business Park and of course BART. It just really hasn't developed.
Yeah, I'll interject just for a moment. So you do have short and long range planning opportunities coming up at LAFTA, and we should take a hard look at the 70X. Not only productivity wise, but I think a common goal of this study was to get all the branding to be the same on the 680. So there was some real ease in wayfinding and usage. And so I think there's a variety of reasons why you want to look at the 70X as to whether it's something that LAFTA continues to run. You could take the revenue hours that you're using for the 70X and put them more into local service. But you have the backdrop of this fantastic 680 express bus service coming right into your Dublin Pleasanton station, that Tri-Valley hub. And so I'm not sure you'll miss anything by eliminating the 70X. You'll probably come up with a whole lot better service funded by the state that would take the place of the 70X potentially. So anyway, I think it's yet to be determined, but I think the overall goal was really to make this great express bus service on the 680 that was commonly branded, and not to confuse folks, to just make it really easy to use. So those are some of the common principles everybody was thinking about.
Okay, yeah, and I was reading in the paper that, if I get the term right, you guys are transit folks, but the FLEE, which is a cutaway bus, is being used in some areas because the full buses are just so few riders. And if you have a corridor that regularly runs, and I know there's a lot of cost to a bus, for example, it's the same cost for the driver, whether you have a 40-foot bus or a cutaway, but so you start looking at how to be more efficient. We're all working on our CAP 2, our climate action plans, and big buses, even if we're in a hybrid mode. It sure is nice to just pair up ridership to smaller units, even like the AV, right? It's very, 10 riders basically. So anyway, I'm just bringing it up. It's always 70X has always been a challenge for this transit organization, in part because we just never saw the ridership. So we need some help from the state. Okay, that's my questions. Thanks.
Any other questions?
I do have one, if that's fine, Chair Halbert. What that you're asking us to fund, is it the startup costs or the ongoing subsidy costs at this time?
We're not asking to fund anything right now. This would just forward the plan to the state. And if this new service were to come online, my understanding, Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, but the TRCIP money would cover the entire cost of the operation.
I mean, I think it's envisioned that new money comes into play for the express bus service and for the improvements at the Tri-Valley hub, all the things that are brought out in the study. And Keith has been really instrumental in working with key players at CalSTA to line up future funding for this project. And then as Keith mentioned, Congressman Swalwell also put in a recommendation for the buses that are needed for the 680 corridor. So we're envisioning a mix of state and federal funding for both operations and the capital costs.
Okay, so none of the costs, startup or ongoing, is on the local agencies.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Question dovetailing with Commissioner Brown's comments. What are the times of these trips in the morning and the afternoon?
Right now, they're non-existent because that was one of the routes that was cut during COVID and hasn't been running since March of last year. But in the morning, first trip out of Pleasant Hill was at 5:41, last trip at 8:07. And in the evening, first trip north was 4:03, last trip 6:03.
So these are every half hour?
Yep.
All right. So if we needed to, we could pare down to every hour?
We certainly could.
to increase productivity?
Well, there's a fine line of reducing service and increasing productivity that it doesn't always result in everybody splitting their trip between everybody who's riding it. When you're running a half-hour service, doesn't just split 50-50 to the nearest hour bus. A lot of them just quit riding.
I see. Okay. Very good. Well, I would just echo comments made that we need to always be looking at efficiency of our routes. So, all right. Thank you very much. No act.
Yes,
Okay.
action is required.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we move this to the Board of Directors.
Second, roll call.
Director Brown,
Yes.
Vice Chair Josie,
Yes.
Chair Halbert,
Yes.
motion passes.
Very good. Item 6, Tri-Valley Accessible Advisory Committee recruitment for terms starting fiscal year 2021-22.
Good afternoon. That will be me, Kadri Kolm, LAFTA's Paratransit Planner. So as you know, the Tri-Valley Wheels Accessible Advisory Committee, or TAC, has 11 member seats and 5 alternate seats. On June 30th, 2021, 3 of the current members have their 2-year terms expired, which will leave open 1 Dublin member seat and 2 Pleasanton member seats. LAFTA issued a press release and we posted it on our website on wheelsbus.com along with the application. We did receive 2 applications, and these were from Sean Costello, who is the current Dublin member, and he's reapplying for Dublin membership. And we also received another application for Pleasanton member seat, and her name is Carmen Rivera Hendrickson. She's also a current member. Their applications are attached to the staff report. So TAC members reviewed the applications at their meeting, which was on May 5th, and they were in favor of reappointing these 2 current members for another 2-year positions. So staff recommends Projects and Services Committee forward the recommendation to ratify the TAC appointments to LAFTA's board.
Any questions? I'll move approval.
One question, if I may, sorry, I was slow to get to the microphone. Has there ever been discussion about term limits? And the only reason I mention that is I think the candidates that are under review are excellent candidates, but many of them have been on the Wheels TAC and before that WAC board for the entire time I've been in leadership. So long times. I wondered, Mr. Tree, if there has ever been a discussion or in other transit agencies, is it normal to have some turnover, or is it normal to have the same individuals just maintain these positions for decades?
No, I think it's a mix. Elsewhere where I've been, it is somewhat normal to have people with a lot of longevity on the committee because they just have a real interest, and it's, I don't know, I just, in my career, I've just seen it somewhat difficult to generate interest out there. It's almost something, it's like running for office. It's just something that is kind of ingrained in someone, and then they want to stay there because they move around on the committee as vice chair and then to chair and then back. And then, you know, but Kadri, any experience on approaches that we might take moving forward to get new interest from folks in the community on the committee? I know you advertise it and it's talked about, but.
Hey, Michael, do you mind I chime in real quick?
Yeah, Tony, you've got a lot of experience with this.
So we do have a term limit, which is four consecutive terms. So if in this case, I think both Carmen and Sean have met that limit. So if we had anyone else apply, then they would have automatically been disqualified for those seats. But because no one else applied, that's why they're able to retain their seats.
Okay, thank you, Tone. Do you advertise in like the Pleasanton Weekly and the Independent newspaper?
I'm not sure. I have to defer to Kadri on that. I know we.
Yes, we
posted it.
do. We
Okay.
put out a press release every year, and it gets carried by the Independent and the Weekly and the Pleasanton Patch, all three.
Okay, all right. Well, let's hope these very capable individuals continue to serve the community in these roles, because there's nobody at their heels looking to take their spots, I guess. So very glad that they serve, and I know they do a great job, but I'm a little surprised that nobody wants to step forward. So, all right, that's the end of my questions. Thank you, Chair.
I'm happy to second your motion, Chair Howard.
Thank you. Roll call?
Director Brown,
Yes.
Vice Chair Josie,
Yes.
Chair Halbert,
Yes.
motion passes.
Very good. Item 7 is Executive Director's Report.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'll keep this brief, and maybe I could even employ Tony to cover ridership. He's your director of planning and watches this really closely. And he's also your director of marketing, which that second item on my executive director's report covers. Tony, why don't you take just a couple of minutes and bring the board up to speed on some good things there, and then we'll have Jennifer Yeamans talk just a quick bit about the transit recovery efforts ongoing in the Bay Area, including that Bay Area or the Blue Ribbon Task Force and the network, the FAIR Network Integration Task Force.
All right. So first with ridership, things are continuing to grow. In May so far, we've had a few days where we've exceeded 1,700 riders, which is an increase. We've seen an increase almost like month by month of about 100 riders. I think like a few months ago, we were at 1,400 a day, then 15, then 16. This month we're at 17. But hopefully the growth will come much more rapidly, because we used to be at 7,100, and that would be a lot of months to get to 7,100 if we only increased by 100 per month. So let's hope that the start of school in the fall, all the students coming back, the elimination of social distancing, being able to pack a bus with, I won't give a number, but I'll just say a whole lot of kids, that should really help us with our ridership come the fall. And I think we're going in the right direction there. We're still at about 25% of where we were pre-COVID. As far as marketing, every year the American Public Transit Association holds a competition called the AdWheel Awards. And it's a two-part thing where they have a first round where they award first place awards in various categories like print media, special events, electronic, etc. And they're also divided by the size of your organization. So there's the small operators compete against each other, and then the middle size and the large agencies compete against each other. So this year, we just were notified last week that we won 2 first place awards. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thanks. Very, very happy to have gotten those. The first award was in the print media category for a brochure that was actually done by our operations and innovation team. So the marketing group can't even take credit for this one. Tone and his assistant Martha were the ones that put this brochure together. It's kind of where we are with the autonomous vehicle and how we can move towards phase 2. And it's kind of a roadmap towards phase 2. And that was the winning brochure. in the print media category. So it's really neat to have your operations team chip in and win you a marketing award.
Hey,
then
go
the-
Tone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Tony, was that brochure was created to attract funding for the project, right? It wasn't
That is-
necessarily a public brochure. It was a
Correct.
brochure for investors.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it was. It was telling folks what it would take to take this thing forward to the next level. And it was really, really well done. I didn't even tell Tone and Martha that I had submitted it. I thought it was a really good piece. And so they were quite surprised when they found out that they won a first place award. The second award that we won was for a special event. As you know, it was pretty difficult during COVID to hold special events. And so we won for the public launch of service on the SAV. So when we launched the service back in November, we had a video produced, and we had a reservation system on our website. We did a lot of Facebook outreach, and through a lot of the chambers of commerce, they helped out a lot. And so that special event was also named as a first place winner. And so those two first place awards are now in the running for the grand prize award that gets presented at the APTA annual conference, which is in Orlando in November.
Chair, may I
Congratulations
speak?
to all.
Thank you.
Sorry. I don't know, David, if you can see us, but may I speak?
Yes, go for it.
I am so proud of the Wheels organization and LabTa organization during the last 4 years. I know since Tony came on board and Michael's been on board and Tone as well, the amount of awards we've received, especially I think I'll call it a sexy, that SAV. It's unique. We made it on the calendar for transit throughout the country. And we had our own month that I hung proudly in my office. And so it has just been a really nice and really cool thing to sort of get marketing. So my question is, are you guys considering a trophy case in the lobby for all these incredible awards you've been getting? Hopefully they're not just a piece of paper, but something that you can actually put on the shelf. So I think we really have a lot to be proud of. And I know you do press releases for these, but it would be pretty cool when we get back to having meetings in place to have that beautiful trophy case for all these accolades that you've received.
We have talked about that, yes.
Oh, I hope you get one, and we don't have to move to the new building to get one. Let's say we can get one before then. But congratulations, everyone.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Anything else to call out on the executive director's report?
Hey, just a quick update on your Blue Ribbon Task Force and that fair coordination and integration task force. I don't know, Jennifer, if you want to take maybe a minute or two just to bring the board up to the committee up to speed on those.
Yeah, sure, if I may. So there's two kind of regional panels that have been meeting for over the past year to year and a half, trying to advance kind of regional transit integration and coordination. This has been under the purview of the Metropolitan Transportation Commission legislatively for many years. And, you know, members of the public and other stakeholders have, I think, been trying to get them to be more proactive in making the region's transit system a lot less disjointed and confusing than many people experience it to be. So the two groups that have been meeting that are now kind of wending their way towards conclusion, and we'll have some potential recommendations and next steps for implementation. The first is this Blue Ribbon Task Force. Michael was appointed to both of these panels by former MTC chair and LabTa board member Scott Haggerty. That was one of his outgoing things he did as MTC chair. And the Blue Ribbon Task Force was established last May as the pandemic was kind of at its nadir with impacts on transit. You know, shelter in place, everything was completely shut down. We were really running minimal operations. And there was a recognition, especially with federal aid coming in for operations, that MTC programs to oversee and kind of guide the transit system regionally through the recovery. So they've they've aimed at kind of coming up with a set of recommendations to basically improve the customer experience, attract more people to transit overall. One of the ways that they want to do this is by establishing the role of a network manager, a regional network manager that would oversee things like transit, a fare integration policy, bus transit priority things that most agencies are currently doing on their own, but which if approached more regionally might result in a more easy to use system for users. There is a bill in Sacramento introduced by Assemblymember Chu from San Francisco to enshrine some of these recommendations and actions into law. It would require MTC to implement some of these things, but that bill is now a 2-year bill as of last week. So I think they found they weren't going to have enough time to button up all these findings and recommendations to get a law passed this year before the deadline. So I think there's a lot more to come on that. I think this group I think it's more than herding cats. I think it's cats herding squirrels. But I think there's a lot of people really committed to the goal. And so we've got to, keep on it and see what their recommendations are. And then how can our users and our communities benefit so that their transit experience can improve accordingly. The second group is the Fare Coordination and Integration Task Force. And I think here the lead story soundbite for you is that there is a meeting Wednesday afternoon that MTC and BART, who were the co-leaders of the study, have invited all transit agency board members around the region to attend. It's kind of an informational webinar on the study and how they're planning to proceed with the analysis of different fare integration and coordination policy options. As you probably are aware, the 27 transit agencies in the region all have they all set their own local fare policies, as this board does, and there's a lot of variation. A local bus trip costs what it costs here, and then it costs something else in Sonoma County. And then, many operators like BART use distance-based fares. So they are trying to evaluate whether a more coordinated and integrated approach to fares policy regionally would basically attract more ridership by making transfers between systems less costly to users and just make it easier to use. So they've come up with a short list of 6 integration policy options that kind of vary from pretty minor changes to like, wow, that's completely different. And then they would all have different agency organizational structures to implement. So that's getting ready to kick off in terms of their modeling activities and trying to draw some conclusions about which might be feasible. So again, these are all things that are kind of wrapping up towards July. Michael's going to continue to be involved, but I think at the end of the day, these are really big questions about some of the big agencies in the region, BART, Muni, AC Transit, and Caltrain to a lesser extent. So we are definitely involved as, a feeder to those services, but they're gonna come up on all the reasons why things are the way they are now today, because change is really hard. But I think, like I said, there's a lot of smart people committed to trying to figure this stuff out. So if you can make that meeting on Wednesday afternoon, if you're interested in this topic, most of us use the system from time to time, at least, if not more frequently. So it would be great to have your involvement if possible. Michael, do you have anything else you want to add? You actually go to these meetings.
Yeah, no, I think you covered it well. Hopefully MTC has been giving you, as board members, information. I sent you out just a quick summary of the meeting as well as the link this morning, just in case for some reason MTC wasn't delivering their emails to you, inviting you to that meeting. So it's a webinar, and anyway, yeah, I think you covered it well.
Thank you. Any other questions about the executive director's report? Michael, I have one. I note that Valley Link's EIR was certified by the Valley Link board. Can you tell me when does that become past the public comment, or is there a public appeal timeframe at all, and or have we met with any legal challenges?
Yeah, those are great questions. So the long story short is we're through the public comment period. The board has certified the document, so they've made it final. The clock started ticking on the ability to challenge the document. And so midnight on June 14th, mark that on your calendar. Hopefully we get through that date and time without a challenge. On June 15th, basically it's beyond the challenge period. So we've had no indications that we'll be challenged on it. Usually you'll kind of hear some grumblings or some motion in the background. We haven't yet, so all things look good at the moment.
Fingers crossed.
Yep.
All right, very good. Moving on then to item 8, preview of upcoming PNS committee agenda items. Anything to call out there?
I don't have any other than what's listed.
What's listed, yep. No questions. We'll move to item 9, matters initiated by committee members. Anything to initiate?
I would like to initiate.
The Carla Brown Trophy case.
Absolutely. Been board member, and so have you, David, the whole time. Been getting all these awards. So, I was approached, and I did mention this briefly to Michael Tree, but I wanted to mention it to the Projects and Services Committee that some of our riders that have large, heavy wheelchairs are experiencing significant problems getting in and out of our 40-foot or large wheels buses. So as the buses become more energy efficient, they're also getting smaller and narrower, and some of the doorways are getting smaller. And we have some riders, which I think so many of them were mentioned as TAC members, are having significant challenges getting on and off these large buses. And so it's time, since they are part of our critical riders and they rely on our transit services, perhaps more than able-bodied individuals, that we need to find a solution for them as well. Sadly, a Pleasanton resident, Carmen Hendrickson, fractured her foot. And I just got a text from her last night that it is in fact broken. And she is believing it is because her comments to me were the cause was getting in and out of our large buses. So the reason I'm bringing that up is I would like support to ask staff to look into other options. Those may be the large vans, it may be a cutaway bus, it may be something that some of our most faithful riders and people who really need our services are being challenged. And it's not necessarily the folks that are like our former board member, Bob Coomer, who had a small wheelchair. These are the wheelchairs where they may have oxygen and have some automation and electronics on board. So I'm asking for support to ask staff to look into options so that we can continue to provide transit services to these individuals, because we can't just go to Gillig and say, hey, can you make our buses a little different than others for these riders?
Michael, is this something that we could easily look into?
Yeah, I mean, it's a complicated issue, but our staff's been working on it, and I'll have something on your next PNS committee. Just a quick look at the issues, a quick look at where we're at and what we have tried to accomplish there. Kind of bring the committee kind of full speed or bring them right up to speed on where we're at with it. So you bet. I'll put it on the next agenda.
Can we also reach out and at least do some work to find out if indeed Carmen broke her foot on our bus?
Yeah, absolutely. We can inform you on that as well. I mean, our teams, I spoke with Carmen last week, and our team had a personal visit with her this afternoon. And so they're pretty engaged in making sure that we're taking a look at everything.
Wow, that's great. Great to hear. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't think
Anything
it
else?
should be, I don't want a huge study, but there are no options for certain individuals if we can't put them on public transit. So, all right, thank you.
Very good. Councilmember, Commissioner Josie, anything to add? Matters initiated?
No, thank you, not today.
Great. Seeing none, our next meeting is scheduled for June 28th, and we are adjourned at 5:01. Thank you all.